Welcome back to another episode of Harmonious at Lunch, the show that fuels your business success. I'm Brandon Gano, your host and guide through the world of harmonious business growth. Today, we're unlocking powerful strategies with industry experts to help your business thrive. If you're a business owner, entrepreneur, or executive, you are in the right place. Join me and our incredible guest today on the journey to clarity, growth, and success. It is time to revolutionize your approach to business. Let's dive in with another episode of Harmonious at Lunch. Welcome back into some more bite-sized business advice. In today's episode, we're talking about burnout. We're also talking about breakfast a little bit on Harmonious at Lunch. I don't know, battle of the meals. I guess we'll see what happens. But I have a very special guest talking about burnout, Michael Levitt. Welcome to the show, and thank you for being here.
Great to be with you. And I actually had breakfast for dinner last week, so we could invite them into the table too if we want. But no,
Dinners,
yeah,
they're off the table. That's not one of the best meals of the day. Keep them over there where they belong.
there you go. There you go.
I am curious about this though. If breakfast leadership is the name of your company. What does that mean? Where did that come from?
Came to me in the shower. That's usually where a lot of good thoughts
Best
come to
place for
mind.
ideas.
There or the device that's usually in the same room as the shower. Sometimes we get thoughts there as well, especially spend a
Device
little
is
too
a
much.
new word.
Yeah, well, I mean, you say loo, toilet. There's a variety. People should hopefully know what it is, but we'll say that device that's in there. But it came to me when I was launching my business because I thought, okay, Michael Levitt Consulting. That's not raising any eyebrows. They're going to say the name, they're going to know what I do, but it's not going to raise any eyebrows. So it's like, okay, what am I going to name this thing? So leadership is something I'm passionate about. I'm a leader. I want leaders to be strong. The world needs strong leaders and healthy leaders so they can lead our companies and our organizations through whatever we get thrown at them. And over the last 5 or 6 years, we've thrown a lot at leaders, to say the least, with pandemics and global strife and economics and elections and everything else. Not been an easy time for a lot of organizations. So I knew I wanted to have leadership in the name, and then I thought, okay, what are we going to call it? And then breakfast is my favorite meal. No offense to lunch, I do love a good lunch as well, but breakfast has been one of my favorite meals ever since I was a little kid. So I thought breakfast leadership. Well, let's see, is that available? Let's go see if the domain's available. It was, so I registered it, and uh, for my birthday a couple of years ago, I actually had breakfast leadership trademarked. For my birthday, the United States government, in government usually sends you things on your birthday. They're asking for money, but in this case, it was a certificate saying that breakfast leadership is a registered trademark with the United States Patent and Trademark Office, which I thought that is so cool. And it's still one of those things I look at from time to time, like that's pretty cool. A shower idea that I was able to trademark. But the premise of the organization is I want healthy leaders. And one of the things that I see happen to leaders of all walks of life, doesn't matter if you're the front lines or the CEO or everywhere in between, I'm seeing a lot of people overly stressed and burning out. And when that happens, that has such a huge negative ripple effect across the board, not just with the individual, but everything and everyone they touch.
Yeah, it's it's a crisis. I don't know if we want to call it a pandemic yet, but burnout is such a big deal. Not just leadership, like top to bottom in organizations. It's probably one of the most costly things that small businesses, all businesses deal with because it can look like a number of different things. It can look like depression. It can take a toll on your physical health, your mental health. And we often don't know it's burnout because it shows up in other ways. Like I mentioned, it could show up in your body. You could have a physical ailment that no one would say you're burnt out. They would say you have cancer. And how would we know the difference, right? So it's one of those things. You mentioned this before we started recording. Preventative maintenance is the best strategy here, and I wholeheartedly agree with you. So I'm curious in this conversation of um, combating burnout and cultivating workplace harmony. I see what you did there, clever, and I like it. Um, where do we have to start? Where do you start? Where do you like to start in this conversation?
Well, for me, burnout impacts, and I love how you said that. It really impacts people differently, and sometimes even the individual doesn't realize they're burned out. Everyone around them might, but they may not know, or it shows up in a variety of different ways. The majority of chronic diseases, I used to work in healthcare. I was a healthcare executive for several years, and I was actually, that's when I had my burnout, ironically. But bur- chronic diseases, the majority of them, stress is a major component of it because our body, when we are stressed, our body has to use its resources to address that stress because there's tension in the muscles, your digestive system isn't working, blood's not flowing properly, your arteries are clogging. There could be a variety of different things. Your cells could be changing, and all of a sudden you're dealing with a cancer diagnosis. A lot of these things can be generated just because you're stressed. And everyone has stress. And we're not going to eliminate stress. We can't. That's just a part of nature and the human existence. It's the prolonged stress that's unaddressed is what gets us in trouble, and that's what turns into burnout is prolonged stress, according to the World Health Organization's definition of it, which they released prior to the pandemic, which was a big deal for the World Health Organization to recognize occupational burnout. That was for me. That was like, okay, now we're going to start talking about this and addressing it. And then the pandemic hit, and of course, that pretty much took front and center of all of our activities and energies and whatnot. But for me, as an entrepreneur, and I know there's a ton of entrepreneurs and small business owners and really successful people, for me, it boils down to a few things you can do, but ultimately, you have to understand who you are. And what I mean by that is not only who you are as an individual, what's important to you, what's not, why is it important, why is it not important, but you need to understand your energy levels. Where are your energy levels throughout the day? Most of us are on autopilot. We get in, we go to work, we're working until whenever, and then we go home and we fire up the laptop or our iBinky. That's my brother's nickname for my iPhone because I'm always on the thing like a pet. Um, I'm sure
That's the greatest name for it I've ever heard.
it is. It's like we are addicted to those little things. They're great devices because you can work anywhere at any time, but they have a really negative side effect. You can work anywhere at any time, and we do. We we could be literally setting in line or in the drive-through. You shouldn't be using your phone while you drive, but yeah, well, there's laws in certain places for that. But anyway, we just it's a natural reaction. My brother, who also gave that nickname, he said, he saw something the other day, and he said, it's basically the new version of smoking. Where maybe not
Mm.
as many people are smoking as they used to, but we get a little nervous twitch, or we have a moment where, okay, we're not doing something, we have to do something. So a lot of people would just light up in the past. Well, now we just light up the screen and we go. They're great devices, but we have to have boundaries around how we use them. And ultimately, eh, you once you understand who you are and where your energy levels are throughout the day, and I highly recommend that you journal those things because we're just not going to remember. Start noticing the patterns. If you start journaling your energy levels, good, bad, and there's apps you can do that too, which is kind of ironic. I'm telling you, don't use your phone so much. I'm just like, well, just use an app on that. But I'm a realist. I know you're going to use it, so I'm not going to tell you don't do this. It's like, sure, whatever you say, whatever system works for you. Document your energy over a period of time, and then you can notice, all right, I am a little bit more energetic during this time block. Okay, maybe if you're a small business owner, you focus that time block when you have natural energy to do the work that requires maybe some additional energy. On the times where maybe you're in a little bit of a lull, structure your day in such a way where you can do things that aren't as energy, I hate the word sucking, but they're not a big drain on you. And this is one of those things where it's harmonious, and I use that workplace harmony thing. And I'm not the first person to say that because when they say work life balance, I have this image of an egg. Try balancing an egg. If it stands up on its own, throw that egg out. Okay, it's defective. Do not eat that egg. They're not designed to do that. So that's work life balance is trying to balance an egg. There's going to be times that are going to be busier. There's going to be times maybe not so much. If you're shorthanded, it's always busy. That's the realization of it. And this is a key point that I want to hammer home. And I'm doing a workshop in a couple of weeks. And if anybody's listening to this or they happen to see it before that workshop, they're getting a spoiler alert on it. One of the things that stresses us out so much is because we're overworked. We have all this work that we have to do, and we're overwhelmed by the work. Is our brain is trying to say, I don't want that to be the case. But the reality is that is the case. So you have to shift your mindset on, I know I have a lot of work. What can I do to prioritize and get what needs to get done today? And then tomorrow we'll tackle tomorrow. And everybody sees, okay, I've got 40 reports to do. So all of a sudden their brain is saying, you have to do 40 reports at once. It's not possible. We can't. So you have to figure out your workflow. And obviously, if you're working with teams, there's all of those things as well. But once you get a grasp of how you work and how your energy is and how your team works, you can start getting a bit of a flow. And once you start getting into a flow, there's less jagged edges, which creates uncertainty, and uncertainty causes stress, and stress turns into burnout. So there's little things you can do, little adjustments that can help a lot. And they've been a game changer for me after recovering from my own burnout journey that allows me to get a lot of stuff done in not as much time as it used to take me because I figured out the systems that work for me and my team to be able to get the things done that we need to get done.
Yeah, I love the analogy and the word harmony. Obviously, I'm biased. I see that. I know what I just said. But the reason it's very intentional, the reason we use that term is because harmony requires action. It it says that basically in order to have harmony, there are things that are doing something. So let's use music, right? If you have if you have one instrument playing, there's no harmony. The minute you have two, you have to either have harmony or you have dissonance. Meaning playing is a verb. They're doing something. So the egg example is fantastic. You can't balance an egg, but you can make an egg stand up if it's spinning. It'll it'll balance itself while it's spinning because it's in motion. When we get out of harmony or we have that dissonance is when we're confused and we're doing too many things and we're also not doing the things that are in line with what that egg or that instrument should be doing. A tuba is not a saxophone. It cannot do the same thing, but we think that we should all be doing things that are outside of our zone of harmony. And I that's why I think this conversation is so fascinating because in the hustle culture that we have on other podcasts and YouTube channels and social media, you have people like Gary Vee and Alex Hormozy saying just go go go. Well, Michael just brought up a fantastic point. What's your energy level? We are all created uniquely and we have different energy pools that we can pull from. Alex Hormozy might have infinite energy compared to you. So if you try to go like him, you're going to burn out in like 3 minutes. And that's just a bad example of trying to be like somebody else. You have to be like you. So Michael, when you are talking to people, when you're doing workshops through your book, how do you help people identify who they are, what the things they should be doing are, and then not only just realizing it, but accepting that reality and living within it so that they can actually maximize themselves and not burn themselves out?
Yeah, for me, and especially if it's working with the team, if it's working with an individual, and I've done that with, and I do that with, executives and whatnot. It's very similar to say, okay, let's rip the band-aid off and let's put everything that you have on your plate right now on a piece of paper or on a whiteboard or whatever we can do so we can visually see the universe. And from there, we can go, okay, do we have any related things that if we work on this, it helps this? Or what quadrant of the brain uses this area? So we try to group things together. And that was one of the life hacks that I did for me several years ago was I tried to structure my days. So I'm using a certain part of my brain the majority of the day. There are parts of my brain that I never use, and that's painfully obvious if you talk to people that know me. But that's another story for another day. But ultimately, figuring out, okay, I've got these similar tasks. They're different, but they're similar, but using, the analytical side of thing, or this is the creativity side, or this is where I need to reflect, or try to group those things together. And even if you're working for somebody, as long as your manager or your leaders know you're going to get things done, typically, as long as you keep them up to speed on it, they may not necessarily care what order you do the work in. They're more or less focused on what's the outcome, when's it due, and hopefully they let you know. If they don't, there's part of your stress. You don't know when things are done or when things are supposed to be done, and everything's priority one. Yeah, no, it's not. No, it's not. That's where communication I find is a huge gap in a lot of organizations. So cutting through those silos helps. And again, when you're starting to work things out and say, okay, why is this thing stressing you out? Because sometimes I can read the body language from somebody. They write this down. I could tell, ooh, they don't like doing that. Why? And and not judging, just okay, why? When I recovered from my own burnout, I did a reflection of, okay, why did I burn out? What were some of the things that I did that created the scenarios for me to burn out? But I approached it with a childlike curiosity. I didn't beat myself up. Burnout did that well enough. I just went at it as a childlike curiosity. It's the same thing when I'm working with people and I want them to kind of approach things with a childlike curiosity too, like they're 5 years old and asking questions all the time. Okay, why is this important? Or why is this stressing you out? Could be they're not comfortable with doing it. They don't feel they have the skill set. Could be a past trauma. Could be something, I did something like that several years ago and I got yelled at and got demoted and it was a bad thing. So naturally they're going to be a little hesitant to do that. So once you flush those things out and bring it out, then we say, okay, well, let's address that and see if this is not hopefully the same type of situation, and they get over that hurdle. And they get over that hurdle, just like any athlete, when they hit another plateau, they feel amazing. Well, people do too. You overcome something that's been a barrier for you. You overcome that, you feel amazing. What does that do? It reinvigorates you. It gives you that little extra boost. It reminds you why you launched this business or why you went out on your own or why you do the work that you do. Again, there's a lot of moving pieces when it comes to trying to figure out how to prevent burnout, and how to recover from it is not as complex as a lot of people think. But preventing it, again, it's using that harmony analogy that we've been talking about during the show today. It's figuring out what harmonious notes do you play or do you need in order for you to be the best version of you.
I so love this conversation. It's fantastic. It's everything we're about here at Human Op, and I love that you are bringing this conversation out into the world too. Because the conversation of burnout is not a 15-minute conversation. This is not even the tip of the iceberg. But more people need to have the conversation and need to be aware of it for themselves and for their teams. If you have employees, teammates under you, or next to you, this is a conversation that needs to be at the forefront because, as I said in the beginning, and Michael echoed, this is the stuff that's going to bring your organization down, and that's not what we want here. We want you to be in harmony. So, Michael, there's a million more hours of conversation to be had on this topic, but I want the listeners to take the next step. Where can people learn more about you, about this conversation, and you have a book too? Where can they learn about that?
Yeah, breakfastleadership.com is the best place to find all the resources. There's videos, there's blogs, there's links to the podcast show, the Breakfast Leadership Show. I figured might as well keep the name the same. It's easier to, for marketing and letterhead and all of that. And also, if they go to breakfastleadership.com/burnout book, they can get a free PDF copy of my book, Burnout Proof, which is a quick read. It's not a Tim Ferriss level read. It's quick, and that's intentional because if you're burned out, here's a 500-page book to help you with that. You're not going to read it. You're not going to pick it up. Mine is under 100 pages. Again, it's intentional because I want you to get to what you need to get to. And it shows you what burnout is. Here's some things you can look out for. Here's some things you can recover from it. And then, of course, as we've talked about before, the deeper work is to figure out, okay, how do I prevent this from happening again? And why did this happen? And that's where I do a lot of work, is just to help people kind of figure out, okay, what are the warning signs so you can prevent this from happening again? Because I had it, you've had it. For me, it nearly killed me. I don't want to flirt with that again. So I do everything I can to make sure that I don't burn out. And, I know the signs, I can sense them if something's coming up. So I immediately go, okay, well, let's take a timeout and let's reconvene and let's go back in. Sports teams do it all the time. Timeout. Okay, something's not working. Let's fix it so it works. And we need to do the same thing for ourselves.
Yeah, that statement, you just blazed right over it, but that is so important. The knowledge of how is my body reacting, or what are the symptoms basically of me going down that path is everything. Once you know that, then you can stop it. Most people don't even know that. So I'm glad you brought that up. So wherever you're watching and listening, all of those links, all of those resources are down in the show notes below. It's also on the screen for those of you that are watching, a link to the book. Michael, I can't thank you enough for being here, but I love to end these episodes with a question. And it's a question from you to the listener. This is, like I said, a big conversation, and it's a necessary conversation. But for the listener, what's a question that you want them to ask themselves so that they can either take action or take the next step along this journey and actually have a takeaway from this episode? What's that powerful question from you to them?
How are you sleeping? If your sleep
That's an
isn't
interesting question.
if your sleep isn't good, that's a problem, because when we sleep and we get good restful sleep, that's when we repair the damage that we do to ourselves on a daily basis. If we don't sleep well, then today's damage gets piled on to tomorrow's damage, and then next day, next week, next month, next year. And then you have some mental and physical challenges to deal with on top of whatever is burning you out. So, if there was a magic pill on helping navigate through burnout situations, take a look at your sleep. That might give you some indications that something's up.
Hmm. Curveball. Did not know you were going to say that, but that's a fabulous question. And I like that. So, Michael, thank you for being here. This was fantastic.
Thank you.
For those of you watching and listening, as you know, Michael is passionate about this topic, obviously, as am I. And we want you to reach out. I don't normally invite the listeners to contact us for the topic of the day, but this one is a huge area of passion for me. I've been through it. Michael's been through it. If you need help, you think you're struggling through it, reach out to one of us privately or in the comments. I'll make sure you get the resources you need. I'll make sure you get in contact with Michael or myself. We have resources to help you with burnout. It's a huge, huge issue, and we don't want anybody to go down that path unnecessarily. But other than that, thank you for listening. I hope this episode helped you. We want to help you build a more harmonious business and life. So subscribe. We want to have you back on tomorrow's episode. Thanks for listening. We'll see you then.